Welcome to the deep dive. This week, the Middle East is just front and center, isn't it? We're seeing this incredible tension between, well, intense conflict and some really significant diplomatic moves happening almost simultaneously.
It's a highly volatile situation, absolutely. We've gathered insights from numerous sources to try and map this out for you. Looking at the shifting alliances, the huge human cost, and these potential breakthroughs in diplomacy. Our aim here is really to give you clarity on what's driving events.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The biggest headline seems to be about Gaza. Sources are confirming an agreement between Israel and Hamas on phase one of a U.S.-drafted peace plan. This comes, 2 years after that initial October 7th attack?
That's right. Phase one, agreed just very recently, lays out 4 immediate critical steps. First, an immediate comprehensive ceasefire, a stop to all hostilities.
Okay, immediate ceasefire.
Second, Israeli forces pulling back to lines that have been pre-agreed upon. Third, and this is so crucial emotionally, the release of all remaining Israeli hostages, whether alive or deceased.
All of them in this phase.
That's the agreement for phase one, yes. And finally, guaranteed entry for essential humanitarian aid into Gaza.
The impact of that, you can't really overstate it locally, can you? For Gaza civilians who have suffered immensely, reports mention over 67,000 casualties. This means immediate relief.
Absolutely. And for Israelis, it's the hope of seeing the last 48 hostages finally return home.
How did this actually come about? The diplomatic push must have been intense.
It was immense. The deal was hammered out in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey were the key mediators. And crucially, it followed a pretty strong ultimatum from the U.S. president to get this initial phase locked down. The focus was really on immediate relief.
Okay, so phase one is agreed, but the full plan has 20 points. Let's unpack the decision makers here, because getting everyone on board for the whole thing seems like, well, a minefield. What were the perspectives?
Well, starting with the U.S. president, he's framed this as a historic achievement, a creative solution necessary to avoid, quote, massive bloodshed. He pushed hard for it.
And he offered something in return, right? Some kind of guarantee.
Yes, significant leverage. He offered full U.S. support to Israel if Hamas ultimately rejected the full 20-point proposal down the line. That's a major security commitment.
Okay, then there's Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Publicly, he said yes to phase one.
Yeah.
Focus on hostages and security.
Right, publicly, yes. But this is where it gets really complex politically. Our sources point to a lot of caution on his part. There are reports of, let's say, contradictory statements made in Hebrew for his domestic audience.
Contradictory about what specifically?
Mainly about the bigger picture elements, things like a full Israeli withdrawal later on, and the whole issue of Palestinian statehood, which is part of the broader U.S. plan. So he's confirming phase one internationally, but at home, he seems to be reassuring his base that Israel is still determined to, quote, finish the job if the full deal collapses.
That sounds like an incredibly difficult balancing act. If he's already sending mixed signals domestically, how stable is this agreement, really? Is the bigger risk internal Israeli politics rather than Hamas?
That's precisely the tightrope he's walking. It's like juggling multiple conflicting demands at once. Meanwhile, you had Hamas. They accepted phase one, the ceasefire and hostage release.
But under pressure, you said.
Sources confirm it was under considerable duress, likely military and diplomatic pressure combined. And crucially, they haven't signed on to the whole package.
What are their main objections to the full plan?
Their key reservations are about full disarmament and being excluded from the future governance of Gaza. They won't agree to that. So they're agreeing to phase one looks like a strategic move maybe for survival, to get aid in, to negotiate, even while internal hardliners probably oppose the final vision of the plan.
And how are other international players reacting? Who's backing this? Who's opposing it?
Generally, key Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE, Qatar, Egypt, they seem broadly supportive. They likely see it as, a pathway, however difficult, towards some kind of normalization and regional stability.
Makes sense.
But on the other side, Iran and its proxies Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, they are vehemently against it. They see it as undermining what they call the Palestinian resistance.
Okay, a lot of moving parts there. Before we continue, just a quick mention that this deep dive is brought to you by ProWave AI. It's generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application that synthesizes complex global intelligence to keep you informed.
And speaking of major commitments, remember that huge figure, something like $21.7 billion in U.S. military aid to Israel since this conflict started? That financial weight probably ties into the next really big development, this new, very firm U.S. security guarantee for Qatar.
Right, that was sudden and significant. A unilateral Israeli strike in Doha seemed to trigger a fundamental shift in Gulf security dynamics. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the catalyst was an Israeli airstrike back on September 9th. It targeted Hamas leaders in Doha, but tragically it killed 6 people, including a Qatari security officer. That caused immediate, serious diplomatic friction.
Especially since Qatar hosts a massive U.S. military base.
Exactly, Al Udeid Air Base. So the U.S. response was frankly unprecedented. They drew a very clear red line.
What did they do?
Around October 1st or 2nd, the U.S. president issued an executive order. This order essentially guarantees U.S. military protection to Qatar. It states that any armed attack on Qatari territory is now considered a threat to U.S. national security, authorizing direct U.S. military action in response.
Wow. So the U.S. is basically protecting its mediator, Qatar, from potential action by its own ally, Israel.
That's one way to read it, yes. It sends a powerful message. Locally, for Qatar, it's massive reassurance. They're in this difficult position, hosting the U.S. military while also mediating with Hamas.
And internationally.
Internationally, it clearly signals a boundary to both Israel and Iran. Don't mess with the mediator. Don't escalate things in Qatar. It shores up U.S. strategic interests and underlines how critical that diplomatic channel is to the administration.
Does this set a precedent, though? Could other Gulf states, maybe Saudi Arabia, now seek similar explicit guarantees from the U.S.?
It certainly could. Saudi Arabia recently signed that defense pact with Pakistan, which already signaled they're looking for stronger security assurances. This U.S. move with Qatar might just accelerate that trend, pushing Washington to be much more explicit about its defense commitments across the region.
Okay, let's try to synthesize the sentiment around all of this. What are traditional news sources saying, and what's the mood like on social media, say, on X?
Well, traditional news outlets seem to reflect a mix of maybe cautious optimism and deep skepticism. The NZ Herald called the peace plan creative, but still a long shot. Deutsche Welle zeroed in on Netanyahu's contradictory statements, highlighting just how tricky his domestic political situation is.
So, general agreement that it's fragile.
Pretty much. Most established sources agree the political hurdles and the sheer lack of trust are immense challenges for the full plan's implementation.
And what about the public conversation on X? Often much more raw.
Overwhelmingly negative, according to sentiment analysis. We're seeing negativity scores consistently between 60% and even 85% across related hashtags like hashtag Middle East, hashtag Gaza, hashtag attack.
60 to 85% negative. That's incredibly high. What's driving that?
It seems to be fueled primarily by continued global outrage over civilian casualties, persistent fears of the conflict widening, especially involving Iran and Israel, and just general anti-war feelings.
Is it polarized?
Highly polarized, yes. You see pro-Israel accounts pushing defense narratives, while pro-Palestinian and pro-Iran accounts focus heavily on the humanitarian crisis and criticize Israeli actions. Neutral, factual updates like UN statements often get drowned out by the more charged content.
Right. Okay. Looking ahead now, the next few days seem absolutely critical for Phase 1. What are the key things listeners should be watching for?
3 main things immediately. First, that Israeli cabinet vote to formally ratify the Phase 1 ceasefire deal. That's expected potentially as soon as October 10th. It's the first major hurdle.
And if it passes?
If approved, a 72-hour countdown kicks off. That would put the potential start of hostage releases around October 13th. That will be a hugely significant moment.
Anything else short term?
There's also potential travel by the U.S. president to Egypt, maybe around October 11th or 12th, possibly to help formalize the deal and add diplomatic weight.
And longer term, we need to keep an eye on that security situation, especially with the new U.S.-Qatar dynamic and Iran.
Absolutely. Beyond the immediate ceasefire, it's about enforcement. Will it hold? And we also need to watch U.S. military readiness. Sources indicate it remains heightened, particularly near Iran's nuclear facilities. That's not just for show, it signals ongoing deterrence and the potential for renewed action if diplomacy falters or provocations increase.
It really has been a complex week. It shows, doesn't it, that even when you get an agreement like this ceasefire, the internal politics and deep-seated conflicts can sometimes be even more challenging than the external fighting.
It really highlights the fragility. You have a deal potentially built on, well, contradictions. Netanyahu maybe downplaying parts of it at home, Hamas rejecting key long-term elements like disarmament. Can something built on leverage and pressure rather than genuine trust actually lead to lasting stability? That's the fundamental question you need to keep asking as this unfolds.
And this entire deep dive, sorting through those contradictions, the official statements, the social media pulse, it was all generated by Stylo News. That's the AI-powered news application we use. It synthesizes information from, I think, over 350 global news sources, plus platforms like X.
That's right. And we really encourage you, if you value this kind of analysis, getting trustworthy, synthesized news intelligence, quickly to check it out yourself. Stylo News can deliver customized insights right to you.
You can subscribe today at www.stylonews.com.
Thank you so much for tuning into this deep dive.
And please do follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms to stay updated.